Hello, folks. Mackenzie Taylor here, senior editor at the Texan, on another edition of our weekly Roundup podcast. This week, we talk about the arrest of a former Houston police officer after his assault of a man he believed to be transporting illegal ballots, the city of Houston moving forward with a plan to totally eliminate traffic deaths, the Texas Electoral College making Trump's win in the state official, changes handed down from the Texas Education Agency relating to testing and school district ratings, Austin City Council elections, Texas's largest public university mandating COVID-19 testing, and we top it all off with a lively discussion about our favorite Christmas movies. Folks, thank you for listening. Merry Christmas, and we hope you enjoy. Hello, Mackenzie Taylor here with Isaiah Mitchell and Brad Johnson. Gentlemen, are you guys ready for another edition of our weekly Roundup podcast?
I'm very ready.
Wow, Zay, that's awesome. Bradley?
As ready as I'll ever be.
There seems to be some reluctance in your voice versus total pep and excitement from Isaiah. So I think that combination will meet in the middle on that.
Yeah, it's like yin and yang, opposites pulling against each other. We'll see how this goes.
Yes. We joke a lot in the office about Brad is an old man, so I think this just kind of goes with the territory here. I say with much affection. On that note, on that note, let's go ahead and get into the news. Brad, you covered a story this week that was Houston-centric. There's a lot of news coming out of Houston always, but I think particularly this week we've covered a lot of different happenings in Houston. Walk us through a little bit of what happened there with an arrest of someone who's a former police officer. Walk us through the charges and what happened there generally.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder there. It was a former police officer, police captain. Now it was a long time ago that he was an operating police officer back in, I think it was 2003 that he left that position. But he was, it was announced his arrest and charges were filed for aggravated assault against the former officer named James Aguirre. The Harris County DA's office put out a press release saying that the assault, the incident, stemmed from an investigation into potential election fraud, specifically illegal ballots. And it ended up with Aguirre pointing a gun at a man who was, from my understanding, in a prone position on the ground. And then when police arrived, Aguirre, told them to arrest him, and things got a little crazy, and nothing bad happened at that moment. But the police, they eventually looked into his complaint or his allegations, and they found no supporting evidence for what Aguirre was alleging, transporting illegal ballots.
So explain in more detail then what exactly Aguirre's supposed motivation was in this action, and walk us through a little bit more detail of what actually happened.
So he was hired, his firm, an investigatory firm, was hired by conservative activist Stephen Hotze, specifically an organization he runs, the Liberty Center for God and Country. And that he was basically tasked with investigating fraud during the homestretch of the election. And this incident occurred in October. It was on October 19th. And obviously the arrests and charges filed didn't come until this week. So 2 months later, nearly. And when police arrived, Aguirre, told them what he was doing. He had reason to believe that this man was, transporting illegal ballots. Turned out to just be a repairman. Whether it was a case of mistaken identity or just a mistake overall is something that Aguirre will have to say for himself. But the police said in their press release afterward, this week, that they found no evidence supporting the allegation. Now, Hotze, who is, as I mentioned, a conservative activist, he was kind of behind a lot of the lawsuits that were filed this year, especially in July through October, November. Now, it stemmed anywhere from the Texas GOP convention lawsuit, just a general lawsuit against Governor Abbott for his use of executive powers, a couple election-focused lawsuits, so kind of a wide array of things. And Hotze said that he did say that acknowledged that he hired Aguirre and his firm, but did not give any directives other than investigate this, see if you can find any evidence of election fraud.
Right.
And the way it sounds, Aguirre was just kind of let on the loose, do what his firm does, investigate things, and culminated in this October 19th incident where police showed up to a scene and found him standing on top of an individual pointing a gun at him. So Hotze then came out today, now this is Thursday, that Hotze called into question the allegations against Aguirre, whether what happened actually happened. Now, he didn't have any evidence for questioning that other than the fact that this isn't coming out until 2 months later.
Right.
This indictment. So that's largely the gist of it right now. We don't really know many more details other than that. The fee paid to Aguirre was $266,000. And to Aguirre and his firm.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Holy moly.
And apparently a large portion of that was paid after the day after the incident occurred. So, I'm sure the prosecutors are going to be sifting through that, see if they can find any paper trail of monetary benefits. Mm-hmm. But if Aguirre is found guilty of this aggravated assault, it is a second-degree felony, and he could receive up to 20 years in prison. Now that's the max. Obviously, nobody got seriously hurt. I don't know if there was much of an altercation before police got there between much of a physical altercation between Aguirre and the repairman. The fact that Aguirre had a gun and the other guy did not would seem to state that there wasn't fist fight going on or something like that. I'm guessing the repairman complied, facing a gun. That tends to be what happens, but nothing serious unfolded other than obviously, if what happened, it was an aggravated assault.
Yeah, certainly. And Hotze, you kind of touched on his history previously, but he's, an activist who in large part has been at the forefront of a lot of the more grassroots kind of meaty conservative issues. Mm-hmm. The bathroom bill, which was a big topic in the 85th legislative session, he was on the forefront of, trying to get that piece of legislation passed. He's known for ensuring there's a host of robocalls sent into Capitol offices to, apply legislative pressure or political pressure to, those in office. Very much at the forefront of these kinds of topics, like you were saying with the lawsuits. He's not afraid to go after those in his own party, and apply that political pressure or even legal pressure in these cases. So definitely a central figure in those kinds of debates.
And the two press releases that were put out there, one by HPD, one by Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, they were very different in tone. The HPD one just basically laid out what they knew. One line, and it says, a lengthy investigation by HPD determined allegations of election fraud were unfounded and no evidence of illegal ballots was found. Meanwhile, Ogg towed more of a political line on it, saying Aguirre crossed the line from dirty politics to commission of a violent crime, and we are lucky no one was killed. His alleged investigation was backward from the start, first alleging a crime had occurred and then trying to prove it happened. So, Ogg, as our colleague Holly has written about quite a bit, she is, a pivotal player in Harris County politics, and she's not afraid to jump into the political rhetoric, which this release attests to, but many of Holly's other stories can show that as well. And prosecutors are not generally supposed to be unpolitical or apolitical like police are, at least police when they're in their official capacity as officers. And so prosecutors have a bit more leeway on political issues, and obviously she is taking it.
Yeah, certainly. And especially I think in Harris County, where there are a myriad of political lightning rod issues that local officials are usually at the forefront of the debate on. So wonderful coverage. Thank you for following that for us. Definitely a spicy story. And, at first we just heard that there was this man who, where this incident happened in a connection to supposed election fraud or suspected election fraud. Come to find out, Stephen Hotze is also tagged onto this story. So never a dull moment. Let's stay on the Houston train here. Isaiah, walk us through a proposal that has been coming out of the city of Houston. It's been on the forefront of the discussion for a while now, but walk us through what happened this week and what, the origin of this plan is.
The Houston train. Yes, speaking of trains, earlier this week, Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner officially announced his Vision Zero plan today at a press conference. And Vision Zero refers to a plan that's been implemented and in more places proposed in a lot of cities around the country and even in some nations around the world, beginning in Sweden. And the title refers to the goal of achieving zero traffic deaths. And the deadline that Houston has set for itself is the year 2030, 10 years from now.
Wow. So in terms of, where this plan originated, we're talking about something that has been brought in. It's been, proposed in different cities throughout the country, throughout Texas, actually. But walk us through a little bit of the origins of it and then talk about, what Harris County is doing to enact it. Sure.
So as I mentioned, it began in Sweden. I believe the Swedish parliament officially adopted it in the late 90s. And it has both environmental and social goals. So on the environmental side, obviously the idea is to reduce pollution. And on the social side, it's to enable people with disabilities to move around a city more easily. And, so generally the way that this is achieved is by, I guess the way that they would put it more diplomatically is deprioritizing automobiles. Mm-hmm. So, the way that the march of industrialization has gone has, just tended to favor the car.
Yeah.
And the idea of Vision Zero is to, do an about face on that march and, turn down traffic deaths and make cities more accessible for people with disabilities by discouraging the use of automobiles.
Yeah. Yeah, more independent modes of transportation where, one person can get from point A to point B by their own volition. Walk us through. So there has been, this is the city of Houston enacting this, but there has also been, the Texas Department of Transportation has talked about some of these ideas. Harris County has as well. Walk us through, the connection between those plans.
Yeah. So Turner officially announced the plan earlier this week, but he signed the executive order last year, August 13th, 2019. August of this year, the Harris County Commissioners Court launched the same initiative. And the state of Texas also has a Vision Zero-like project. I don't know if they're working totally under the aegis of the Vision Zero organization itself,
right?
Which, is a real organized apparatus. But the Texas Department of Transportation has a goal to eliminate traffic deaths by the year 2050. So they're giving themselves a little bit more leeway than a single city.
A little bit more time.
Yeah. But nonetheless, a very ambitious goal to end all traffic deaths by the year 2050. So that's what the Texas Department of Transportation is doing. And they've got some hashtag for it that you'll see on those orange signs above the highway,
Yeah.
I think it's in the streak. But and so we've got a link to Texas's own Vision Zero-esque project somewhere in the article there. And as I mentioned, the Harris County Commissioners Court launched the same initiative earlier this year. So imagine kind of a Russian nesting doll system of Vision Zeros that is culminating in Houston. And they've already really begun work on this. As I mentioned in the article, the Public Works Department in Houston has already begun rehabilitating roadways, as they put it, which typically means cutting down on within the city on car lanes. Obviously, that looks different on a highway where there are only cars, no bikes or pedestrians or anything. But the head of Public Works, Carol Haddock, I was trying to find her first name in this article. She said that Houstonians can expect new color-coded sidewalks, curb ramps, and crosswalks in the city. And another part of the Vision Zero plan is widening bikeways and building new bikeways, laying 50 miles of sidewalk every year, 25 miles of high comfort bike facilities every year. I think that's just a fancy way of saying bike lanes.
Yeah.
And other
High comfort. I wonder what that looks like.
wide.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of jargon here that can be easily rephrased as less cars, more feet, or, you know, wheelchairs, bicycles, and things like that. And so as to the progress that they're making on this now, as they're doing current construction, they are. I'm trying to find this in Haddock's own words that are very bureaucratic. So she said, "We evaluate each roadway during construction to evaluate the safety needs of all users. The goals of Vision Zero are straightforward: to create a safe, equitable, and accessible network of streets." So as they do projects already, planning has begun to comply with this project.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my, somebody from Houston read your article and texted me and screenshot that particular portion where, you lay out, okay, there's going to be new paints, new lanes, we're going to update existing roadways, yada, yada. And said, okay, but they're not going to fix the potholes. Like the potholes are the big problem, right? And I thought that was an interesting perspective from somebody in Houston. And certainly this plan is met with support from some folks and, opposition from others. So it'll be interesting to see what the timeline for this looks like, particularly, as leadership in Houston largely remains the same, but there will always be a changing of hands, right? It'll be very interesting. So, yeah, Brad.
And as you kind of alluded to, this is a broader effort across the entire country to implement these goals and carry them out. City of Austin, I don't know if they have a specific, I would not be surprised if they do, but I don't know if they have a specific Vision Zero plan passed through ordinance, but they did pass a tax levy this year. Well, the big one was for light rail, but there was a secondary one for sidewalks and bike lanes, and that was a couple $100 million, tax increase as well. Another example is Connie, our fearless leader, was telling me a couple months ago that back when she was in the ledge, someone in the state legislature tried to slip all of these Vision Zero goals into a bill, and it was once that was exposed, the bill was killed. But that this effort is constantly there to put these goals and endeavors into state code, local code, whatever it may be, to try and force the envelope on it. And it expands well beyond Harris County and Houston. So
yes, it does. Light rail is relevant because I've been mentioning foot traffic and sidewalk traffic a lot, but another goal of Vision Zero is to funnel the population more and more into centralized public transportation to make that easier, more accessible to use, and to get people get people out of cars and more onto the sidewalk or, public transport that can include things like light rail. Mm-hmm. The implementation tends to include things like reduced speed limit, obviously more and wider bikeways, and changes to traffic signal timing, which is something that I've noticed in Austin. This is purely anecdotal, but, I haven't looked into city council meetings on the subject, but when I got here, I've noticed that especially in downtown, the little walk light will come on well before the green light turns. Mm-hmm. So there'll be, 15 seconds where all lights at an intersection are red, and it's just a little walk sign for pedestrians. That's not always the same. Like in plenty of cities, the green light and the walk sign come on at the same time.
Right.
But that kind of change is part of Vision Zero. Like you pointed out, whether or not Austin has officially adopted that is, it's piecemeal in Austin and in a lot of places. Elsewhere in the country, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, and New York City are some other Vision Zero cities. And, we've linked to an article in there kind of summing up how it has progressed in those places.
Now, have any of these cities that have implemented these policies, what's the result been? Has there been an elimination of traffic deaths?
No. But they've got till 2030. So
we got some time.
Fingers crossed.
Some time to implement.
Like I said, I work at the Texan, if y'all didn't know. And so the deepest research in this article goes into Houston and the state. So I haven't delved a lot into the data for LA and San Francisco because then that was just inevitably adversarial. So in terms of its success, I have noted in other studies, including the article that we linked to, that some other Vision Zero cities have seen a reduction in deaths, but an increase in crashes, which is interesting. So there are more non-fatal crashes because the roads are gummed up with lots of different kinds of traffic, and previously you just had cars on a particular road, and now you have a car lane, a bike lane, a bus lane, and other forms of public transportation that are expected to share the same pavement. So
yeah, certainly.
Yeah, so they've seen reductions in deaths in certain cities. Not all of them. Results vary, but
results may vary.
Yeah, results may vary. Easy payments of 99, 99, 99. But in the cities that have seen reduced traffic deaths, there have been more accidents, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But more info on that, as I noted in the Bloomberg article that we linked on the words Chicago, LA, San Francisco, New York City.
We're getting so specific here. Well, and I think that these issues are incredibly important to zero in on. Most folks don't necessarily know. Zero in on. That was unintentional, and both of you are going to hold that over my head. Daniel will when he listens to this podcast. But I think they're important to focus on because these are the kinds of policies that directly impact, Texans' everyday lives. It may not be big, flashy legislative action taken at the state capitol, but it affects how you get to work every day. So really good information for us, Isaiah. Yeah,
I mean, on that note, just as a closer to this topic, Turner was joined by Police Chief Art Acevedo, Houston PD, and Acevedo pointed out, what he described was essentially that Houston, by adopting Vision Zero, was abandoning the more traditional strategy on the part of the police department of just encouraging drivers to wear your seatbelt and drive safe and go under the speed limit. And, in general, a strategy that's dependent on personal responsibility. And by adopting Vision Zero, Acevedo said in his words that that's raising the ante. And now, instead of relying on drivers to, take personal responsibility and be safe of their own accord, they will be discouraged from driving cars and encouraged to use their feet or public transportation. And, speed limits will be lowered. Speeding tickets will be pricier. That's what we've seen in other Vision Zero cities.
Yeah.
And the road is expected in places where it's not already to be pieced up into bikeways and, wider sidewalks and what have you.
Yeah. High comfort bike lanes. We're all about some comfort. I think most people are. Bradley, we're going to pivot to you. In an exciting, change of events, the Electoral College met and kind of solidified something that had already taken place. But walk us through a little bit of what happened this week, where it took place, and what the result was.
Yeah. I mean, it was totally shocking, especially if you're to take at his word one august comedian, Jimmy Kimmel, because he showed a video.
One august?
August.
You mean gassed?
It's an adjective.
It's an adjective.
Well,
okay. We'll work. Okay, continue.
I'm making fun of Jimmy Kimmel.
Got it.
Just know that.
I'm trying to catch on to what's happening here.
Because he had a show on whenever he has shows. I've never watched him.
Wow. Again, old man.
Yes. And he showed a video of the Electoral College in Texas and the chairman of the body, basically announcing that they were voting for Donald Trump. And he, in his classic, rudimentary, lowbrow humor, pokes fun at the person for doing his job and announcing that Donald Trump had been awarded Texas's Electoral College votes. So, apparently he was pretty shocked by that. But, so Texas, the Electoral College, 38 delegates met in the Capitol, convened by the Secretary of State. and they, like I said, cast their votes for the president of the United States and the current vice president of the United States. It was all pretty, standard ceremonial. Basically, everyone knew it was going to happen because of the way the Electoral College is set up. And I was explaining this to Isaiah earlier. So the way the delegates are picked is each candidate, each party has its own set of delegates. And the Republicans, for example, the individual electors, delegates to the Electoral College, are appointed through the state party convention system. Now, there are various qualifiers they have to meet, and I think the Democrats might have a slightly different process, but that's how they're appointed. And so each state, most states, I'm not aware of one that doesn't, but Texas is one of these that has in code that the winner of the popular vote of the state is awarded those delegates. And so their section, Trump's section, the Republican section of delegates, is awarded the Electoral College designation. And so they convened, past what was mainly a ceremonial vote, and that was it.
Yeah. So in terms of how this actually happens, like you said, they convene at the Capitol. They take over the legislative chamber. Was it the House that they took over? Is that where they were?
It was the House. Yes.
Yes. And they actually physically cast ballots, right? So they go in and these delegates are tied to whoever, from their party wins that election. And that happens. And I think it's interesting in that there's so much heat about the Electoral College in terms of national discussion of whether it should be abolished, right? And what service it actually plays in terms of electing the president, particularly after this election cycle. I mean, we really had a wild election in terms of what topics were at the forefront of the debate. Donald Trump in and of himself is a lightning rod of a figure. And you have Joe Biden, who's, his ascension to the nomination was also a very interesting path. And there were a lot of obstacles for him, both personally and politically. I mean, it just really kind of wraps up a crazy season in terms of how the election happened in a very, quiet and just parliamentary way. Right. It was just this meeting of electors at the Capitol who, placed the final, dot on the I or cross on the T for something we already knew was going to happen.
What did we hear for 2 years since Beto narrowly lost to Ted Cruz was that, Texas is in play. Partially, it was partially true in that the margin of victory that Donald Trump had in Texas in 2016 shrunk, 3-4 points down to 6 points. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's in play, and 6 points is a pretty wide margin, but it definitely got closer. But it's, as you kind of alluded to, it's the Electoral College casting their votes this week is basically just a boring cap on what we all knew was going to happen.
Right. Constitutionally, nothing else could have or should have happened. Just in Democratic states, the same thing.
Just like California.
Yes.
California was never in play for Donald Trump.
Exactly.
But it kind of, it's a stark contrast to the constant and incessant revving up of the populace by, frankly, the mainstream media on, Texas is in play. Texas is in play. The game has changed. And that didn't happen. Yeah. And, I did a piece a few weeks ago right after the election about how the polling, especially national polling, was so off.
Right.
And specifically locally, they actually locally got it pretty close to correct in terms of the percentage difference.
For local outlets.
Yes.
Right.
But the Dallas Morning News was by far of a national polling outfit or a local one the most off. They had Biden at plus 0.1, so very basically even, but still very far off. And so this ceremony is just a perfect encapsulation for the what was reality the whole time, but was at least being sold as not that by many of the voices in the media.
Well, and I think too, Another cap off is the Texas Monthly came out this week with their Bum Steer Awards for the year of 2020. They awarded Bum Steer of the Year to the Texas Democratic Party.
Yep.
Saying, okay, y'all served up a lot of expectation when Beto was on the ballot, and there was a lot of, a narrative driven both by media and by Texas Democrats saying that there was going to be a real possibility that seats that previously had been held by Republicans or even statewide offices would be flipped blue. Did not happen.
Yeah.
And it isn't saying that there isn't an opportunity for that. And next election or the elections after that, Texas is changing as all states are. There's shift happening in the populace. But it says something when, a mainstream media outlet like Texas Monthly awards a derogatory award to the Texas Democratic Party after this election cycle.
One thing that that popped in my head quite a bit since the election, I wrote a piece way back in, I think, 2019, way back in 2019.
Wow.
It's been forever. Where I spoke to Jay Cost. He's a pretty notable political pundit at the national level, and talked to him and Sean Trend with Real Clear Politics about whether Texas is a swing state. And one of the things that Cost said was that this idea of demographics equals destiny totally ignores the fact on the ground of what the parties do in the state. And one massive example of this that undoubtedly played a role in, in especially the state house races that Republicans lost no ground on.
Yeah,
was this police / protesters and police violence, that kind of thing. That the way many Democrats handled that did not help them when the time came for polling or for the election. And, just because demographics are changing does not mean that that the projected inevitability is going to come to fruition. Just take the Rio Grande Valley and all the other the border counties that are not part of RGV, but shifted massively red. So a couple of them even turning fully red. And so just saying that, Texas is changing does not really, it's not an honest representation of the way politics works. And that's the way a lot of media operated. They just, they saw what happened with Beto and said, oh, this is going to happen again because Donald Trump will now be on the ballot. Well, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
And take Donald Trump out of it. Republicans won in a landslide in Texas with, John Cornyn won by 10 points. I think it was slightly over 10 points. Donald Trump was the closest statewide race in the state.
Yeah.
And that does not bode well for generic Democrat party against generic Republican party in Texas. And, a lot of that has to do with the way actual politics unfolded in Texas since 2018.
For certain. Yeah, absolutely. For certain. One more thing before we move on to the next topic. There was a resolution that was tacked on in part of the discussion with the Electoral College. Relatively unprecedented, different kind of approach to this. Walk us through what happened.
Yeah, so this was the first time in Texas, not sure if it's the first time any Electoral College delegation, but this was the first time one in Texas had issued a statement of resolution. And what they did was, after they officially approved the votes for Donald Trump and Mike Pence as president and vice president, they brought up this document basically condemning the Supreme Court for dismissing the Texas lawsuit. And of course, that got dismissed out of standing. The court found that there was no legal ground for Texas to sue another state for their internal election protocols. And the rest of the case is very very complex, and there's a lot to it. We have stories on that both from me and our colleague Kim. So if you want a refresher on that, go ahead and look there. But this resolution is apparently the first time a Texas delegation to the Electoral College has exercised this power. Now, there's question whether they have this authority anyway off the bat. I don't know.
Right.
It's disputed, but they did it, and it really, it's just a resolution. And so, like, resolutions in the legislature, largely they mean nothing.
Yeah.
It's a statement of
statement.
position. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, they issued this statement and, condemning the Supreme Court for doing what they did, and called for the state delegations of the 4 states Texas sued, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, to basically nullify the election in their state, the statewide popular vote, and just have the state legislatures appoint the delegates themselves. And if having that fail, they pushed Congress when they have to, I forget the technical term, but basically confirm the electoral votes cast to somehow, reject it. And there's a very convoluted way that I read a piece on it. I couldn't begin to explain it all in great detail, but some convoluted way through system maneuvers that they could, change it, but change the result. But that's likely not going to happen. And when they convene on January 6th, odds are almost certain that Joe Biden will be accepted by the delegation as president-elect.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you for covering that for us so thoroughly. Isaiah, we're coming to you.
All right.
There have been some changes coming down from the state, handed down from the state in terms of STAAR testing and A through F ratings for public school systems here in Texas. Walk us through, a little bit of what the STAAR test is, and give us a little bit of an idea of the legislative proposals that have come out so far ahead of the 86th or 87th legislative session. Wow, we're really cranking through those legislative sessions.
Yeah.
That's not true, but it feels like it to me.
It seems like just yesterday there was the 86. The Texas Education Agency announced last week that it's going to pause the A to F school ratings for this school year, but it will continue with the STAAR test. So the STAAR test is STAAR. The acronym is long and cumbersome, and it's in the article. It's an end-of-the-year state standardized test for students. So it's pretty typical. Matt Krause of the Texas House, you like that?
That was
proposed, has proposed legislation.
Please clap.
Yes, please clap. Krause has proposed legislation that would let schools swap out the STAAR test for some kind of post-school preparedness test, like the ASVAB for the military or the SAT. So the STAAR test has taken a lot of flack from all sides, or I should say from both parties, because education is kind of one of the last frontiers of bipartisan disagreement that's, left in Texas politics, which is interesting. But State Rep Matt Shaheen, who has been a long-standing critic of the STAAR test for, being too rigid, too one-size-fits-all, he filed a bill that would bar schools from using test scores as the sole measuring stick for teacher performance. So when you're evaluating teachers, under the world in which this bill is passed, you would not be able to only use their students' STAAR tests because, Shaheen believes that that's too reductive and the STAAR is not a good test. State Senator Beverly Powell, a Democrat out of Fort Worth, filed a bill that would require the state auditor and the State Board of Education to investigate the test and see how well it actually measures student success. And earlier this year, State Representative Dan Flynn has publicly asked the governor and the TEA to suspend the accountability ratings attached to the STAAR test, foretelling an unreliable and unfair evaluation of students, his words, because of the pandemic. So there's a lot of skepticism about standardized testing in general, namely the STAAR test in the case of Texas. And so we've got bills coming in from both parties expressing suspicion about its efficacy and how necessary it is.
Yeah. So then in terms of A through F ratings, walk us through what that means for school districts and, what move has been made by the TEA this year.
Sure. So it's misleading because it seems like grades
for
that
students.
you get. Yeah. The STAAR test is for students. I took the STAAR test. A to F ratings are for the schools themselves. They are an accountability rating that is meant to measure how well the school prepares students for success after graduation. And the TA defines that as college, the workforce, and the military in broad strokes. So all of these are evaluated in terms of how well the school is preparing the students who do graduate to do well in college, or to be good workers, or to accurately gauge whether or not they're going to go into the military. And they're an accountability rating for the schools. And you can actually search these up on a database that we've linked in the article, and see if the school that you or your child goes to has a good rating. But it is A through F, so kind of like a regular grade that you would get in college. I don't remember getting the actual letter grades in high school. It was always just numbers. But the TA and the commissioner tend to look at these ratings, or take these ratings into account when deciding whether or not to intervene in what they believe could be a struggling district.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a financial tie there to a certain extent. So walk us through, in light of the A through F suspension, what the STAAR test will mean for TEA in terms of monitoring student achievement.
Right. So as I pointed out, a lot of lawmakers are suspicious of the STAAR. A good chunk of citizens too. And
it's not a very popular test.
Yeah.
You had an approval rating of the STAAR test here in Texas.
I mean,
it would be pretty.
Are any standardized tests? Do they?
Well, that's
any
kind
of them have
point.
a high approval rating?
No, but the STAAR test is at the forefront of all of that discussion, right? It's the one that gets, I believe, lambasted most heavily.
Yeah, and I mean, I won't share my opinions on STAAR, except that naturally I didn't like it when I was a student because I had to take it.
Who does? Who says, "Oh, yippee, a standardized test"?
Yeah, I think there are better tests. I think the AP test is good, but Mike Morath.
Boom, you got it.
There we go. Yeah, you corrected me on that last time I mentioned him. He wrote the release for TEA, and he said that the issuance of A/F ratings for schools has proven to be a valuable tool to support continuous improvement for our students, and in so many words, say that it's a good tool to gauge schools. But because of the weirdness of this year, in terms of schools, especially because of shutdowns and uncertain reopenings, they're going to suspend the A/F ratings, but they're going to keep the STAAR ratings so that they can gauge student success during this kind of disruption. So, that generally the TA's argument is that the STAAR is a good measuring stick, and that without the STAAR this year, we will not have the good data to judge how well students have done. So, we don't just want a blank spot in the log, despite opponents of the STAAR, according to the TA. Instead, the TA is trying to just collect this data that is expected to reflect bad scores this year. Online learning and uncertainty and, weird reopenings, the whole statewide patchwork quilt of different school regulations. There's a general sense, especially during the pandemic, that no one really knows who's quite in charge.
Yeah.
And that certainly applies to schools. So, for a number of reasons, STAAR ratings are expected to not be so great this year.
Yeah.
And that has really been the impetus behind a lot of lawmakers calling for its removal. Coincidentally, a lot of them didn't like the STAAR beforehand, like Matt Shaheen. But it has proven opportune during the pandemic to argue that the STAAR test this year is going to be so bad that if we shouldn't get rid of it, we should cut the ties that it has to evaluating teachers and schools and student success.
Certainly. Well, thank you for covering that so well for us and laying out the arguments just surrounding the whole issue. Bradley, another election happened this week, particularly here in Austin. Walk us through the two races on the ballot and the issues that were the most important surrounding them.
Yeah, so these were runoffs. The top two candidates in each district, it was District 6 and District 10 in Austin for city council. Nobody reached 50% at the general election on November 3rd, so the top two candidates moved into this runoff. The two districts are arguably the closest to swing districts you could have on city council. One of them, District 10, that is held by Allison Alter. She won re-election, but she won re-election by a much slimmer margin than she did last time. But the other one, this is District 6, Councilman Jimmy Flanagan. He got upset by his challenger, Mackenzie Kelly. Both the challengers were, as far as Austin goes, pretty conservative.
What a nice first name she has. It truly is a nice name. I think it has a nice ring to it.
Just rolls off the tongue.
It just
doesn't it?
rolls off the tongue. Now she spells it incorrectly, but I'll forgive her for that. Continue,
Doing
Brandon.
your vowels.
And so Kelly ended up beating Flanagan by 4 points, and Alter defeated Jennifer Verdon by 2.5 points. So both of them were pretty close, and obviously because of the runoff, the turnout was far lower than it was in the general. But Kelly managed to win the Austin part of the district by like 750-ish votes. So a pretty wide margin in such a low turnout election. And she managed to only lose the Williamson County part, which I believe Jimmy Flanagan lives in. It's his home part of the district. She only lost that by 75 votes. So, in terms of raw numbers, these were both very close. But obviously, percentage-wise, when you consider the fact that it's a lower turnout, Kelly's win was pretty significant. And this district is the one that Don Zimmerman once held. He won it in 2014. And Kelly actually ran for that position then. And Flanagan also. Flanagan lost. Zimmerman held it for 2 or 3 years, and they faced off again. Zimmerman and Flanagan. Flanagan won that one, and he's been in the position since. So this race was actually the second time Kelly and Flanagan had squared off, although the first time in a winner-take-all kind of situation.
Certainly. So in terms of what this means for the council moving forward, walk us through that political makeup. And political, we say this, loosely because these issues are political at the local level, but the races are by definition nonpartisan.
Right.
So regardless of whether they are liberal, progressive, conservative policies, whatever is being, proposed, these people were elected not on a party platform.
Yes.
They're elected based on issues that they talk about on the campaign trail, but there's no R and there's no D next to their name.
But don't let that fool you that nobody is affiliated with a specific party. It's just not officially on the ballot as such.
So you're saying these people they're still ideologues to a certain extent?
Certainly, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
But this, while it doesn't really mean much for what will pass through Austin City Council, because Kelly will be one vote among 9 or 10 others, 8 or 9 others, I believe. It depends on if you're including the mayor on that. But and so this will basically, she'll be a protest vote for whatever the city council wants to do. I'm sure she'll want to actually get stuff done as well. But that is basically why she was elected, was to throw something else into the mix with what has largely been a uniform city council, which leads me into the various factors that contributed to her victory. And I lay it all out in the article on the website in pretty great detail. So I first of all, I recommend you go read that because it is a better purveyor of what went down than just me talking about it. But as a short rundown, there were many policies. Obviously, the main one right now that's in everyone's minds is the police defunding, the slash of 1/4 of the Austin Police Department's budget. That was passed unanimously. Also, that's pretty notable is the city's homelessness situation. Obviously, that was thrown into national prominence back in July of 2019. This is one of the things that I've covered probably more than anything else at this job. But that was also passed unanimously. And they rescinded a camping and lying ban. And so if anyone has been to Austin since then, it's very visible what happened. People moved, whether it was from a shelter or in the woods, out into the public where they were clearly visible. And actually, I cite this in the article. The city's survey, homeless population survey, just from the beginning of 2020, found that there was a massive shift from sheltered homeless individuals to unsheltered. So there's clearly an incentive to come off out of the shelters and onto the streets, and that incentive is that they were no longer being penalized for it. There was another less well-known policy that was passed, actually spearheaded by Jimmy Flanagan back in 2017, to basically encourage more bail bond reform. And so the ordinance suggested is the right phraseology, that these municipal court judges who are handling a lot of these lower grade misdemeanors that a lot of the homeless population engage in, they incentivize them to let them out on bond on PR bond, personal or cognizance bond. That's essentially no bond whatsoever, just the idea that I'm trusting you to show up for your court date.
Right.
And then another factor in the election was, the pandemic and what the city, not only the city, but the state has done in response, specifically, the tolls taken by businesses. And so Austin businesses were hit by both the homeless situation and, the problems that come with that. For example, the 7-Eleven on South Congress, one time last summer had to call the police at least 24 times in one day. That coupled with the financial setbacks that the pandemic and the government mandated shutdowns have wrought on them, it's made life pretty difficult, and it has all contributed into this one recoil by voters against what has been just, like I said, uniformity by the city council for these progressive policies. Now that's, Kelly will not be able to, stop any of these things from, being put into place, but, she's going to council, and she will likely be a no vote on a lot of these, especially these similar types of policies. And, that's basically her prerogative and her mandate from the voters.
Yeah, certainly. Well, thank you for covering that for us, particularly in light of the issues that you have been following so closely in the last year and a half. Isaiah, last topic, we're coming to you. This week, or just recently, Texas A&M University came out and said, okay, we're going to require certain students to test for COVID-19. Walk us through what that mandate looks like and what the frequency of these tests and what it requires.
Yeah, so A&M is going to require every student that lives on campus to get a COVID test. And this is according to a public message to the student body by the university president and the provost, which states, at the start of the spring semester, Texas A&M University will require all students residing in university housing on the College Station campus to test for COVID-19 prior to the end of the first week of classes, which is on or before January 22nd. The idea is to get ahead of the same kind of initial surge that they saw when students first arrived in the fall. And so this will not apply to students who live off campus, though testing is strongly encouraged for them.
Certainly. So then, in terms of other universities in Texas, what kind of requirements have been, issued by other universities in comparison to A&M?
I very tentatively but strongly at the same time say that A&M is most likely the first public university in Texas to require it. The way I phrase it in the article is that out of the other big flagship universities that have a lot of campuses in a system, A&M is the first to require testing for all on-campus students. So that list comprehensively is the University of Houston, UNT, University of North Texas, the University of Texas, Texas State, and Texas Tech. So those other 5 flagship universities have systems and satellite campuses, and A&M has beaten them to the punch in terms of requiring testing for students on campus. The only reason why I'm not just outright saying that they are the first public college to mandate it is because of the sheer number of public colleges in Texas, whether or not you're going to include community colleges, and the ambiguity of a lot of the language of schools' COVID-19 requirements. What you see a lot of is even in the most straightforward style on a university's COVID-19 dashboard, which they all have, there will be a little spot that says everyone or all students or all employees or what have you are required to, and then there'll be a bunch of bullet points. And by the time you get to like the fourth or fifth bullet point, it stops being an infinitive statement. And so at first it's like all students are required to, first bullet point, wear a mask to class.
Right.
Second, I don't know, maintain 6 feet of distance.
Certainly.
Then you go down the list and then it's just like, all people should be tested. Or like, it is imperative that everyone is tested. And the language starts to get more and more ambiguous. Anyway, A&M's test opens up a can of worms because it's public. So these private universities obviously have a lot more leeway with their rules in general. Baylor actually required a test back in the fall. They required their students who were returning to send in a negative COVID test in the mail before they could come back. Rice had the most stringent requirement, which was weekly testing for the students who live on campus. And I don't know how they executed that.
Yeah.
Because they might have decided that was too hard. I don't know how closely students followed that, or how they can force it
to,
right.
etc.
Mask requirements are pretty universal at public and private universities, but the idea of having a public university require on-campus students to test is interesting. It's still conditional because it's if you live on campus, and my understanding is that A&M does not require students to live on campus. I knew people from my high school that even as freshmen got apartments, so the fact that there is a little note of voluntary action that takes place as a condition of getting tested will probably help them out legally. But, who knows what legal challenges they'll face for this.
Certainly. Well, thank you for covering that for us and ensuring our readers are informed. It's certainly an interesting thing to watch how different colleges, just as different ISDs in Texas, enact COVID restrictions or take precautions. One thing before we jump into our fun topic, which I'm very excited about, folks. Brad, give us a quick teaser. This week we put out a really insightful interview with Railroad Commissioner-elect Jim Wright. You hosted, as this is a topic that you have been following very closely, a race to which you followed very closely. Give us just a quick teaser, maybe the 30,000-foot view of one thing that readers would find interesting listening to this podcast.
Well, I think the main thing is just getting to know who Jim Wright is. And he absolutely was an unknown quantity before this. Never been in politics before, never ran for any office. And, here he is winning a statewide election by a landslide. And so just getting to know him better. And I've had conversations with him before, so I kind of knew him, but obviously most voters do not. And, I think it's definitely well worth the listen, especially for his stories about rodeo that we discussed.
Oh, I like it. That's a good tease. Wonderful. Well, we're excited for that release. It's released on our website and will also be released in podcast format this coming weekend. Boys, let's get down to the nitty gritty here. This is incredibly important, as all our fun topics are, but I think this one should be considered with the utmost respect and reverence, considering the nature of the conversation. Isaiah, you really are getting a kick out of this.
Yeah.
It does good things for my ego, so thank you. Please continue. Favorite... Okay, boys, favorite Christmas movies. Walk us through what your favorite Christmas movies are. Brad, do you have an opinion? Do you want to start?
Wait.
He looks reticent to begin.
I want to guess Brad's favorite Christmas movie.
Oh, I like it.
I'm not shooting for number one. But
if you say Die Hard, I'm going to.
Okay, is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
No.
I wasn't about to guess that you'd say that, but it's not surprising to me that you think that.
Okay.
I was going to guess National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is like in your top 5.
That is, I feel like that branding works well
Yes,
for Brad.
I would probably put that in my top 5, yes.
Nice.
The scene where the uncle is outside and his skivvy's dumping out the sewage from his RV. It's just hilarious.
What did he say?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
It has been a while since I saw it, but yes, I would probably put that up there. I like Elf.
Good choice.
I've always liked what's the one with the heat and the snow miser?
Huh?
That's The Year Without a Santa Claus.
Yes, I've always liked that one.
Wow, that was some meta stuff right there.
And you know, I'm going to go on a limb here and say the greatest Christmas movie of all is Love Actually.
Oh my gosh. I was not prepared for that. For real?
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I do enjoy it though because it is just so outrageously bad and funny.
Wow.
But it is a Christmas movie.
I was not prepared for that. It actually.
Nigel, the old dude making a comeback on his soundtrack, is one of the most ridiculous people I've ever seen in a movie, but very entertaining.
I was going to say, do you identify with him?
You know, the only thing I would identify with him is that he's old.
Okay.
I'm nothing like that guy.
Okay, great. That's really good. That bodes well for you.
I'm
Just
nothing like
in life.
an aging British pop star or rock star.
Darn
whatever he
it.
is.
I was hoping the similarities would be more, more in
pronounced.
line. Yeah,
Well,
that's correct.
So,
Well, good.
sorry to disappoint you.
I'm truly disappointed. Isaiah, where are you at with Christmas movies?
Number 1 has got to be Charlie Brown Christmas Special.
I love it.
I don't know if it counts as a movie because it's pretty short, but that's my favorite.
That's amazing.
After that, it might be for me. My number 2 is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, whatever that long title is. The Chevy Chase one.
Yes.
Whose dialogue I have memorized.
Really?
I
That's
mean,
impressive.
not really. But
I had Monsters Inc. the dialogue to Monsters Inc. memorized as a kid.
You mean like totally memorized?
Well, like the first 15 minutes.
That's ridiculous.
It
I
was.
just meant that like I know it all off the lines.
Oh, then that's good. That's more impressive.
It's kind of that's less. Anyway, all right. Yeah. So those are up there for me. 2 very different movies.
Yes.
It's a Wonderful Life is great.
Yes.
I really dig it. I don't know if it's that near the top for me, but we always watch that one on Christmas Eve
That's a great
at my
Christmas
household.
What do you guys think of A Christmas Story?
I really like A Christmas Story.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
It's a classic, but it's not my top 3.
I think I like that one better than It's a Wonderful Life.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's ridiculous. Okay, that's interesting.
I'm drawing a line in the sand though. If for anyone that thinks Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then you have to accept Gremlins also as a Christmas movie.
I've never seen Gremlins, so I can't argue with you.
It's actually, I shouldn't say it's a good movie. It is an entertaining movie. But it happens around Christmas. And so, the same parameters apply to Die Hard. So if you were saying that Die Hard, not saying you are, but if one says Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then they have to accept Gremlins also as one.
Well, wasn't Die Hard released in July? I think it was. Which I understand the premise of people saying that it's a Christmas movie because of the music, the scene, the setting, whatever. But I believe it was released in July, which
I don't think it has to be released
disqualifies
around
it.
Christmas to be a Christmas movie.
I echo that.
But I think that begins to show the intention of the movie and whether or
Well,
not
do
it
you
will
know
be
for sure that any of the
categorized as
classic
something along
Christmas movies were not released outside
That's
of the
fair.
Christmas
That's fair.
time period?
I don't know. Okay. I'll say we need to wrap this up. Folks, we could talk about this all day.
You could talk about
That's
this all
correct.
day.
Yes, and by we, I mean me. I think my favorite all time is A Wonderful Life. I think it's really hard to say that there's, a movie that doesn't necessarily think it's just so good. And it's such a great Christmas story. Charlie Brown Christmas, if we're including that, would probably be number 1, but I don't know if I should include it as like a movie. It's a special.
Yeah.
But
That's fair.
That would be number 1 if we were including it. I love that.
I cannot stand the Polar Express.
Oh, you don't like
You
the
are-
Polar Express?
Nope. That little kid with the glasses is the most annoying little turd I've ever seen in my life.
Lean. That one?
Yes.
Oh,
Well, that's the whole point.
he's
Oh,
a villain.
Yeah, he's a villain. You need to have
Well,
some
he
sort
makes
of
me hate the entire
antagonist.
movie.
That's
Oh, come on.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's I think that's a little aggressive. Elf is my favorite comedy. I love Elf. I think it's so brilliant and so funny.
Is that because you are basically Buddy?
Correct. There is some identification there that does, make it more, I don't know,
Relatable?
inviting. Yes.
Oh, inviting.
I'd also say White Christmas is a dark horse. I think that's a great classic, but it's not my top. Polar Express we watch every Christmas Eve. That's a movie we watch every. Yeah, Brad. We also do We Eat Sweet Potatoes.
You're just saying that. You're
Correct. We don't do
You're
that.
so lying.
Yeah, I am. But it was fun to say because Brad hates sweet potatoes.
Oh, I just looked up Christmas movies on Google.
Yeah.
And there's a GQ magazine article saying that Lord of the Rings is the greatest Christmas movie.
Okay. I do like watching Lord of the Rings during the wintertime.
What? Oh, I thought you were about to say, okay. Like around
And
Christmas.
Harry Potter,
can't
those
make
are
that-
both two series.
Neither of those are Christmas movies.
But they're fun to watch around Christmas
Sure,
time.
but that's a different question entirely.
Yes, exactly. I think they're just cozy. I don't think they're Christmas movies. I think they're just cozy. Well, I mean, orcs getting beheaded isn't necessarily cozy, but
Oh, really?
just in my opinion, others might disagree.
That's some light entertainment.
Yeah, I think so. Just like Buddy the Elf. Okay, folks, thank you so much for listening to us. Well, particularly me, talk about Christmas movies. It's made me very happy. Gentlemen, thank you for obliging. It was actually your idea, so...
Yeah, it
Or
was.
Brad's
and,
idea, wasn't it?
You know, I kind of hate myself for bringing it up, but whatever. You know,
So begrudging.
throwing you a bone.
Oh, Lord in heaven. Well, folks, thanks for listening. We will catch you next week. Thank you all so much for listening. If you've been enjoying our podcast, it would be awesome if you would review us on iTunes. And if there's a guest you'd love to hear on our show, give us a shout on Twitter. Tweet at the Texan News. We're so proud to have you standing with us as we seek to provide real journalism in an age of disinformation. We're paid for exclusively by readers like you, so it's important we all do our part to support the Texan by subscribing and telling your friends about us. God bless you, and God bless Texas.